Use the scatter plot above to answer the following questions. So let's take a look at the scatter plot and see what kinds of questions they're going to ask us about. So we see from the title here, this scatter plot is showing the percent of Zimbabwe's population age 15 to 49 with HIV. Here along the horizontal axis, this is our independent variable, so that's giving me years since 1990. So let's be really careful to pay attention to that year since 1990. So for example, if we were looking at this year 15 right here, 15 wouldn't be the year 15 or the year 2015, it would be 15 years since 1990. 15 years since 1990 would represent the year 2005. So we'll want to be careful when we look at that information there. And then here it says percent of population. Well, what about the percent of the population? Back up here, it tells us it's the percent of Zimbabwe's population, age 15 to 49, with HIV. So this is the information we have, and let's see what they're going to be asking us to do with this. So they're going to ask us to describe what has happened in Zimbabwe since 1990 in terms of the percent of its population, ages 15 to 49, who had HIV. So just a little description for us to understand what's going on in the scatter plot. Then they're going to ask us to approximate the highest point on the scatter plot and write it as an ordered pair. And once we write it as an ordered pair, we're going to think about what information that point gives us. And then finally, in part C, based on what you see in the scatter plot, what predictions would you make for the percent of Zimbabwe's population with HIV in the year 2015? So moving ahead. So let's see what we can do here. Describe what has happened in Zimbabwe since 1990 in terms of the percent of its population ages 15 to 49 who had HIV. So let's see the story that this scatter plot gives us. Notice we don't have a table of values, we only have the scatter plot to rely on. So we can see here in 1990, so 0 years since 1990 is 1990, right here. It shows that 10% of the population of Zimbabwe that were ages 15 to 49 had HIV. And then notice what happens. There's this sharp increase. It's going up. In 3 years, that percent doubled, which is pretty frightening. And then in another 3 years, it went up even higher. It didn't quite double this time. It wasn't going up quite as steeply. And then we can see it kind of leveled off and then started coming down sort of gradually. And then we can see here it's leveled off again. Okay. So if we want to describe what's happening in terms of the HIV, we could say, well, since 1990, during the first 6 years, so from 1990 to 1996, there was a large increase in the percent of the population that had HIV that was in that age group. And then it leveled off for about 3 years, and then it started a gradual decline, but now it started to level off. So that's what this graph is telling us. It's telling us something about the story of Zimbabwe in terms of its battle with HIV among its population. Okay, so that's how we can kind of put some words to that. And let me just, I'm just going to actually type some of that in just to give you a sense of what that can look like. I know it's one thing to write, to talk about it, but another thing to kind of write it. So let's do that. So I'm going to come over here and oh, and we're going to, and I'll go ahead and put that in italics so we can see how that works. So describe what's happened. So from 1990 to 1996, there was a steep increase from, we said 10% to about 26% of the population with HIV. And then again, we want to be specific here, from 15 to 49-year-olds. And then the percent we said leveled off for about 3 years and then started a gradual decline. Then we saw there at 18, which represented 2008. And so from 2008 to 2011, we saw that it kind of leveled off. So we can write a sentence about that as well. So from 2008 to 2011, the percent leveled off at about 15%. Okay, so that's how we can respond to these questions. It's just giving a sense of what is the story that this scatter plot is telling us. Okay, so that's the answer to our first question. Now let's take a look at what the next question is asking us for. So let's scroll down here. Approximate the highest point on the scatter plot and write it as an ordered pair. What information does this point give us? So let's find the highest point here. So the highest point looks like it's this one right here. And I'm going to just erase some of the stuff going on just so we can see that point more clearly. So my highest point is right here. And if we were to approximate that point, remember we would go along the horizontal first. So that would take us out to 6. And then I would go up to about, I'm guessing that that's around 26. So we could estimate that point as 626. Okay. So that's the first thing they ask us in part B, approximate the highest point, 626. Now, that's not enough. We have to answer the other part of the question. What information does this point give us? Well, remember the 6, that was the year since 1990. So what year would that be? It would be 1996. So that tells us in 1996, about 26% of Zimbabwe's population, because remember this is about Zimbabwe, so Zimbabwe's population, and then this is again 15 to 49-year-olds, had HIV. So even an individual little point tells a story, something that we can talk about and get meaning from. The final question, based on what you see in the scatter plot, what predictions would you make for the percent of Zimbabwe's population with HIV in the year 2015? So we better start thinking about, well, in 2015, where is that going to be on my graph? So let's scroll back up here. 2015, how many years is that from 1990? Well, 2015 minus 1990, that would be 25 years. Okay, so it would be just past this point here, 24. Now notice at 24, there's no point there. Why isn't there a point at 24? Well, because we haven't gotten to 2014 yet. And so there's no data for that year yet. So we're being asked to make a prediction based on what we see. Now there could be a couple of things. Some of you might say, well, it looks like it's leveled out, and so I would expect that it would stay leveled out at about 15%. That would certainly be a legitimate prediction. Others of you might say, well, I can see that it's been coming down and then we had this kind of leveling off. But I think with with the way that medicine is going and as populations in different African countries are being more attentive to HIV and AIDS, I think that this is going to go down even more. Maybe it's going to be somewhere between 10 and 15%. That would be a legitimate prediction as well. So what's important is that you can make a prediction and then that you can use the graph to back it up. So let's just see how we might write that up. So again, I'm just going to go into my kind of typing mode here. So let's do this in italics so we can see this is our answer. So I would predict in 2015 that the percent, I'm thinking that it's going to continue to go down a bit, that the percent of Zimbabwe's population with HIV, and again, ages, and this ages from 15 to 49 is important because that's not the same as the entire population, right? So with HIV, will go down from 15%, but will still be above 10%. Because I think, and again, this is just what I think, it's not, I don't have a crystal ball, so I don't know for sure, because I think that the trend for the decrease in percent will continue and that it won't just hold level, hold steady. Okay, so that's how you can respond to these questions. Be sure you're using your English skills and that you're responding clearly and in a way that anybody in your class or anybody in any of your other classes could understand what it is that you're talking about. Take your time when you're writing up your responses to these things. It will really make a difference in terms of how you understand the material.